Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to Platform1. This is the fourth year in us running this event, and the idea behind this event is to really find out what the hot topics are going on in the marketplace, understand how technology is applying itself to those topics, and then start passing on that information. We've reached another real strategic element in our business. We've been doing these seminars obviously for 4 years, and we've been doing previous seminars longer than that, but we've probably started seminars on file-based workflow about 7 years ago, and it was very interesting to watch how the take-up of file-based workflows from this acquisition sources through to the full workflow through to the end took its time to come in, and we really didn't see it triggering into the market until at least 2 years after we were first presented it. But that file-based workflow has extended itself much further now, and obviously one of the big phrases that we use all the time is cloud. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to start understanding what the cloud means, what technology out there it takes advantage of the cloud, what does the cloud give us, and we're going to try and understand that throughout today. Just before we start, so I'm John Harris. Hopefully some people know who I am, some people don't. Chopper to others. Couple of elements. There are free bags downstairs. I wasn't doing a very good job of handing them out, so they're out down there for you to grab, and you may want to gather brochures or other elements later on. The other element is the brochure on there. There is a survey form on the back. We would really like you to complete that. We really do take that feedback, and we've actually modified the way we do this exhibit based on feedback we've had over the last 4 years. In addition to that, this card also represents your ticket for the prize draw at the end of the day, which is for a free copy of Media Composer. So the idea is that the last session of the day, you hand your card in, we draw it out of a bag, and one person wins a Media Composer directly at that moment. So do make use of that, do fill that in, do put your name at the top. Don't you remember you doing your O-levels, CSEs, GCSEs, whatever it is now? Okay, that was O-levels for me. Cool, so let's get started. So we want to demystify the cloud a little bit. We want to talk about the technologies that are available for the cloud. But let's just start talking what the cloud is. Because I'm constantly hearing the phrase, oh, we'll put it in the cloud. Put what in the cloud? What are you trying to do with the cloud? What are we trying to do? And there are several ways that we can approach the cloud and what we want to achieve with it. We can obviously extend our networks, and we're going to be showing some really interesting technology on that later on. We can distribute our material, but utilizing cloud services. We can obviously store media in the cloud. This is actually potentially a very interesting area for us at the moment. We can use the cloud that has a render farm. We can interact through cloud services. That means to interact with our media. And then we need to think about our cloud. Is it a private cloud? Is it the public cloud? Do we go to an Amazon? Does our facility become a cloud-based service that has remote operations? We need to think about all of those elements as we go through that. So let's just spend a little time just think about each one of those individually. So we want to extend our networks. We're probably all very used to doing this already. I expect most of you have the ability to VPN into your office, work from home. So you're using the internet or the cloud services to actually extend your network and give you that virtual private tunnel through to your office networks. So we're very, very used to that technology and that process of doing that. But there's actually a way we can take even more advantage of extending networks. And one of the things we're going to show you later on, we're going to show you about how we can extend workstation services across the cloud to remote locations. So it's going to be one of our prime demos this morning. We can distribute. Now, distribute's actually become very common now. Quite often, we're all very used to uploading to an FTP site that happens to be a server in the cloud, and then people can connect to that server. The benefit of that is now we're not limited by our bandwidth from our office. We're only limited by the bandwidth to the internet. So our bandwidth allows us to get the file up there, but then our international distribution will have their own independent bandwidth into the cloud. Big advantages to distributing through cloud services. So we like those things. As always, with these things, the story I constantly hear about this is people put a program up for distribution through the cloud only to discover that the wrong audio track or there's a spelling in the program that's gone wrong, and then having to tell everyone, hang on, stop downloading it, we're going to have to reload up a new program. So be warned of those. Storage in the cloud, well, we're going to spend a long subject today about archive. And one of the big archive elements is cloud-based services for archive. And there's some very interesting financial models that actually are associated with that. So we're going to spend a lot of time about how we can use the cloud to do our archive services. And I think that's a very interesting area because the cloud allows the smaller productions, etc., to have the enterprise-scaled archive facilities without having to build that IT infrastructure. So the cloud gives us a lot of flexibility to be able to do this. So we're actually very excited about that. Rendering is a very common process today. We can buy into scalable cloud. So when we talk about cloud scaling, we don't just talk about storage scalability, we also talk about processor scalability. So we can increase our processor farm, or we can increase our storage farm as and when we want to decide to do it. So as a job comes through, we can actually just switch on and say, right, I need more rendering power for the next week or next 2 hours, and that allows us to scale without us having to invest in that heavy hardware and have to then make that into a long-term return. Interact with the cloud. Well, we're going to show you some services about how we can interact with our media directly through cloud services. Our last demo at the end of the day is a very interesting demo of what we're trying to do, because we actually bring live video to cloud-based interaction at the end of the day seminar. So make sure you stay for that one. I think people were quite impressed with that. And then finally, the whole debate, public or private. You know, where is our cloud? Is the cloud, for example, is it the Route 6 cloud and everyone just dials into Route 6 and picks up the Route 6 services? Do we go into a more public cloud? So we need to think about those elements that go with that. As always, there are issues that we must consider throughout all of these elements. Performance. Performance is a big one. Performance is something we still really don't have the ability to truly measure. And performance doesn't just go through the bandwidth of our network connection. It goes to how many processors we've enabled, what our disk farm is. We need to think about what type of media really is going up there and what type of interactivity we want with that media. If we're going to put 4K uncompressed DPX files in the clouds and interact with them, it's not going to work. Did anyone know that? You're very quiet this morning. Cheer up, bloody hell. Okay. So performance is an issue. Bandwidth continues to be an issue. We're obviously seeing, you know, fiber optic really getting around the UK now, and that's going to answer a lot of our issues. We have several people at home now who have 100 megabit connectivity, including Maxim here, who's here telling you how wonderful his internet connectivity is at home. I think we have a 4 megabit connectivity at Route 6 or something like that. But bandwidth is coming, and it's coming very fast. So I think we're going to start seeing that issue disappearing on us. Latency. Latency is going to be a question, and it's actually quite interesting. Through yesterday when we did this presentation, how often latency came up into the equation. And latency is how we can dynamically interact with that media. If I press mark in on my laptop connected to the cloud, and it takes 8 seconds. And when we say 8 seconds, the reason why we use 8 seconds, the original concept of web services is that if a website doesn't open up its page within 8 seconds, you'll lose that customer. So in the IT world, 8 seconds is 5. Mark in, 8 seconds later, your mark in point's going. I don't think we're going to be happy with that. So we really need to think about latency and how we interact with latency and what we're going to do with those things. So latency becomes a big, big problem, and you're going to hear about that throughout the day as well. Cost. So we had some very interesting elements of cost. I'm not going to lead into this because there's a really good slide in the archive session which talks about cloud and cost, and it gets very interesting about what we can do. And we need to think about how those costs are. The whole argument of whether it's an asset cost or whether it's an operational cost. And this operational cost process gets very interesting as we scale up and as we build and scale our systems. And then finally, ownership. And this is a question, I'm not sure we quite answered it yesterday, but obviously content is king. This is your IP. If we're just going to store and archive our IP in a cloud, what responsibilities do we have to make sure we don't lose that IP? It's all very well if the cloud crashes, what if the company goes bust, what happens when your contract ends? And we're going to answer some of those questions, but the reality is, in this file-based world, we really must take archive seriously. And we'll talk a lot about that today, and it's obviously a very hot topic at the moment, because that is it. That's all your investment is in that media. And if we're not taking that seriously and entrusting it to our FireWire drive or to a cloud-based services we rented for a week, then we're going to be in trouble. So we have to plan ahead, not on the day the contract closes saying, oh, we need to get our media out of the cloud, because we're going to lose it. So we need to think about that carefully. And then finally, security. There's quite a lot of debate on this yesterday. And I think one of the people, we obviously talk about security in regards to piracy. We also talk about security in regards to access of media. Because one of the big elements we're very much aware on international law at the moment. We have a documentary program over here that's very legally sensitive at the moment, and they're using the cloud for some of their distribution. And none of that media can go onto a server that's based in North America. Because in the USA, the government have the right to access any media on any server. So it's a very interesting political debates that actually go on those things there. So not only do we have to worry about piracy, we also need to think about where our media is and what the implications are there if it's sensitive types of media. Piracy, I know there's a lot of debate on that and how far we need to push piracy. We're all very used to the old days when feature films used to go around in the back of a white courier van to all of the cinemas, and the guy used to offload them at some telecine house and get a master dub on it. So I don't know, suddenly the internet has brought up security in a big way. So, to cover all of those subjects and start introducing that, we've got quite a strong agenda today. We're going to open up with the Amulet and Adobe, and I'll introduce that a bit more in a minute. We're going to look at archive and storage. We've got Frontport, Zendata, NLTech. We're going to do some live demonstrations. We've got DPP, obviously the ability now for us to deliver files across the internet into the broadcasters, and we're going to talk about the structure of those files and about how we can deliver those. Future of broadcast video. We brought that as a hot subject because obviously one of the big things from NAB is 4K TV. So, we've got to start being aware of 4K TV. We're going to start having a lot of sporting events shooting 4K. Japan has its own 4K channel going on there end of this year. So it's becoming an important topic that we need to prepare for. And then finally, we're going to spend a big time on production asset management, and we're going to do that demo that I mentioned earlier in that session. So, in an attempt to try and bring us onto agenda, I'm going to rush us across to our first demonstration today. We're going to introduce two products that very much use the internet and network services to extend and allow remote operation. I'm going to hand you over to Phil Crawley, first of all. Phil Crawley is our broadcast engineer from Route 6, and he's going to talk about a technology called Amulet, which allows us to extend our desktop work services remotely from the operation. So he's going to introduce that from there, and then we'll cross over to Maxim after that. But let me start by handing you over to Phil. Thank you.